Hello, Property Realmers. Good afternoon. It's CEO here, and today what we're going to be discussing is on SMSF lending, and we'll be running a bit of a Q&A session with Todd Neill, the managing director and finance broker at Xenium Finance. Todd, it's great to have you on this afternoon, and for those who don't know you, maybe you can introduce a little bit about yourself, your experience, and how you help those with SMSF so far.
Sure, CEO. Thanks, mate. Well, I spent the last 20 to 30 years in banking and finance. Been broking for about 25 of those, and we specialise in business commercial development financing. And SMSF sort of comes along with that because it's a little bit more technical than the usual home lending. So we look after all sorts of clients, PAYG, self-employed, business owners, and we also help other residential brokers with their work too. So we train other residential brokers in business and commercial loans, and we also facilitate loans for those brokers who maybe don't have as much experience as our group does. My business partner is Sam is in Melbourne. I'm in Brisbane. We've got staff in Canberra as well, and we really look after clients nationally, not just in our geographic locations. COVID certainly helped with that, with a lot of move to video, and we're happy to facilitate just about any loan that someone has a request for.
Yep, fantastic. So, reason why I wanted to touch on the discussion around SMSF lending. Often I get, being in the property space, I get a lot of inquiries for people who are either wanting to set up SMSF, and we touched on earlier, there are those who want to take control of their SMSF. We touched a little bit on those who maybe better suits for controlling or managing their own super, and for those who maybe aren't. What we'll touch on today, and I'd love to get your feedback, is for those who are looking at borrowing using SMSF, whether they've got SMSF set up or not. Generally, what are the more suitable situations that you find SMSF clients in who have SMSF set up and are looking for borrowing? Maybe we can touch on why SMSF holders are looking to borrow generally from your experience.
Mm-hmm. So we generally have two types of SMSF borrowers. The first one is someone who wants to invest in residential property. And we're seeing a bit more of that now because as interest rates have moved up, people's borrowing capacity individually is being exhausted. So, once upon a time, they might have been able to buy 2 or 3 properties themselves in their own names. Now, with interest rates moving up, they simply can't afford that anymore, but they still want to invest in property. Now, self-managed super fund lending is, not the premise behind the assessment is on the fund itself, its contributions, those contributions it receives, and the rental income. So it's not determined by whether or not, you've got other loans outside of the SMSF loan. I'm not saying that won't be looked at. I'm just saying it's not determined by that. So you could effectively, you may have the opportunity to buy more property inside super, okay? Once, if you've exhausted the outside borrowing capacity. The other type is often a business owner who's buying their own commercial premises for their business to trade out of. So with residential property, you can't rent it yourself or have a family member rent it, okay? But with a business premises, that's different. You can have your business trade within the commercial property that's owned by your super fund, and you're now paying rent to the super fund. So those are the two main types of people that we have. I'm not sure that I can think of any others anyway, but some people want to buy commercial property for investment. That's fine. You can buy those assets. There's a lot of assets you can fund with super fund borrowing. To give you an idea, you could go to 80%, sometimes 90% on a residential property within super funds. That never used to be the case. When they first came out, we were looking at sort of 70 to 80%. Now we can do 80, we can even do 80 on commercial. So if a commercial property is in a major city, then 80% is achievable with your self-managed super fund. It just comes down to affordability, right? So you can certainly leverage up using the super fund borrowing. Not as many lenders are in that space anymore. So,
Okay.
so most of the major banks, in fact, I would say all the banks are out. I could be wrong. I think NAB might still do it, but you've got to have a minimum balance of $5 million sitting inside your super fund. So that kind of cuts a lot of people out, right? So, but there are plenty of non-banks in the market. We use those mainly, and they've got some good LVRs and some fairly competitive interest rates.
Awesome. So you mentioned that in the current market, it seems like, and I could relate to that as well, where uh, those with the interest rates that are high, those who previously may have been able to purchase multiple properties under their own name, they're somewhat limited, and they're utilizing or they're looking towards SMSF to continue leveraging their borrowing capacity. For those, so prior to jumping on, we touched on uh, so we're in the property space, and there are a lot of people who simply want to use SMSF or get involved with SMSF so that they can purchase an investment property. What are some of the concerns that you see for those um, who may not be making the right decision, or that you'd probably not recommend for utilizing SMSF for buying or borrowing um, for investment property purposes?
Look, I guess first and foremost, we're not financial planners, and we don't give advice to people about whether or not they should set up a super fund or what they should use it for. However, I would say from experience that, for the most part, people who do set them up with the intent of buying property, a lot of that comes from wanting some kind of control over the investment strategy of the super fund.
Hmm.
And we would say to them, just because it's a self-managed super fund doesn't mean you shouldn't take advice. You should be going and seeing a financial planner. You should be talking to them about your asset allocation. They should be doing a full profile on you to make sure that this is the best thing for you. And I may have sounded like I was joking a bit before camera,
Hmm.
but to be frank, some people make bad investment decisions. And whether or not they should be making those decisions with their own superannuation, I don't know. I think everyone should at least be talking to a planner, getting financial advice about why are they doing this? Is this the best thing for them? What does the investment strategy include? What are their responsibilities as a trustee? Because there are responsibilities that they have to adhere to. You're not entirely in control of everything. There's legislation that
Hmm.
covers this, and you need to take it seriously.
Yeah. So with the legislation, maybe you can touch on some of the requirements for borrowing using SMSF. Some of the questions that I've got from the group members here are why is the interest so expensive, considering the percentage of loan to value ratio, and not being able to utilize equity down the track for purchasing other properties in their SMSF. And I might be wrong. Can I get your feedback on that?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, the interest rates are not particularly expensive. Um,
Hmm.
Now, that's not to say that there are some loans out there where the interest rates have been increased and people are paying too much. So, and I'll give
Hmm.
you an example. We're currently refinancing someone's super fund loan from a bank provider, and their interest rate is 9.1%, and we're refinancing them down to about 7.3. So,
Okay.
so reasonable interest rates are there. However, there's two things in relation to that. One is it's a small marketplace. Now, if you
Mm.
have a small marketplace with not many offerings, so you have scarcity, then your pricing is going to be higher because you
Mm.
can't go anywhere else to get it. Okay, so there's some conditions to getting a super fund loan. You have to go through some expense. to set the fund up, to set the property trust up, to find a property, to get the advice, etc. You will be paying on the way through, and you will pay more for this product because this product is not as available as other products. So I don't know how to make it more simple than that, but
Yep.
if there's only 3 red cars and everyone wants a red car, then it's going to be the most expensive, right? So that's one of the reasons why it's higher. But if you're currently got a loan, you're paying 8.5% to 9%, then you need to review that. And the thing is that many people don't notice when they have an existing loan in super what they are paying because it's not impacting on their pocket every week like the existing interest rate increases are. Okay, so people are worried about their budgets at the moment. They're seeing their home loan repayments go up or their rent, but that impacts them on an after-tax basis. Meanwhile, their contributions still keep going in to their super fund. And, their current lender is increasing the interest rate in their super fund loan and they don't know or they don't take any notice because it's not impacting them. So I would say if you think the rates are very high and you've got an existing loan, you should definitely look around for a refinancing option.
Awesome. I can see there's a few viewers who are joining in. And guys, if you have any questions regarding SMSF and lending, feel free to drop your questions into the comments. We've got Todd O'Neill here, the managing director and finance broker at Xenium Finance with over 20 years experience. Happy to answer your questions. And even if you're watching this on the replay, again, just drop your questions into the comments and we'll be able to assist with your questions down the track. So I touched on briefly, Todd. There are many who are considering setting up an SMSF for the acquisition of property or getting involved with property investments, and it may be due to restrictions on a personal level due to interest rates that are increasing. What are some of the things that property investors and owners should be considering whether they're looking to set up an SMSF or whether they've already got an SMSF and are looking to diversify?
Well, I guess in terms of, if you're looking to set it up, it's not the cheapest exercise. You need to talk to a financial planner about whether or not it's worthwhile for you. Okay. So, we can't throw around numbers in absolutes, but if you've got $130,000 in your super fund, and you think that you're going to buy a property with that and have a diversified portfolio, etc., as well, then you may need to reconsider, because we still need, say, 10 to 20% deposit for a loan. So that's not going to buy you much, unfortunately. And then you need to consider what sort of returns you're getting from a rental perspective and whether or not that can repay the loan that you're going to take out. Again, I keep saying financial planners, but the thing is that those are the people that put together, put together the long forecast planning on cash flow and returns and determine if this is a good investment.
Yep.
Making that decision yourself, I think, is challenging.
Okay. So, and you touched on previously there are some property investors who simply want to take control and manage their funds, and there are those who also want to manage their funds, but are open and seeking advice at the same time. What are some of the things that, or maybe a better question can be, generally from those who get advice, what kind of position are they in with their SMSF or their property portfolio, and then what kind of properties are they looking for using their SMSF for those who may be a better fit for utilizing SMSF lending?
Well, I don't think we can precondition whether or not someone is definitely suitable when they haven't got advice yet. They need to consider their personal circumstances. I realize that's just a very broad answer, but I can't definitively sit here and say, well, you need $347,000 in your balance and you need to do this, and that sort of thing. I guess it's just considering, is the investment right for you, and what Does it fit the investment strategy of your super fund? Because I believe that you need to have one. It's not just, hey, I'd like a super fund and I want to go buy property, you know. More needs to be considered. Does the asset fit that strategy? What are you trying to achieve from it? And then, excuse me, and then we can have a look at, from a borrowing capacity point of view, and we do this all the time. People come to us and say, look, this is what my super fund looks like. These are my contributions. If I wanted to buy a property, how much could I borrow?
Yeah.
So we run that exercise and we say to them, look, if you're going to buy any property, this is how much you can borrow. This is the rental return you'll need. It needs to fit that parameter before we could get you a loan. And we can do that exercise, right? And they can take that information to their financial planner and say, here's what I think I'm doing. This is what I'm thinking of doing from a strategy point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So it's important to understand what kind of product needs to fit their situation, and also getting advice at the same time. I can see a few more people joining in here. Peter and Josie, how you doing? I've got a question here from Unga, who asks 9, even 7% interest rate on loan. Is that normal on an SMSF? I think you answered that earlier.
7%, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, there are some 8.5 and 9s, but what I'm saying is that you can probably get 7.1 to 7.3. Now, that may seem high, but, you know, as I said, the market's pretty small for it. It's a complex product. It's being offered by mainly non-banks in a very small market in comparison to the rest of the lending that gets done. So, yeah, between 7 and 7.5, I think is competitively priced in this marketplace.
Yeah.
There's certainly people on home loans are in high 6s at the moment. You may not be, but there are people who are. So yeah, certainly that interest rate is competitive.
Yep, awesome. Some of the comments that I got earlier was around the utilizing equity from your property that you might own in SMSF for other purchases. Can you give any insights or feedback on whether they can't, or what's the situation around that for SMSF holders?
No, you can't do that. So the way that self-managed super funds and the borrowing is set up is that you'll be asked, you'll need to create what's called a bare property trust. Okay, so it's just it's a property trust that hasn't been used before. It's just solely for this purpose of buying this property. That property trust will own the actual property, and the super fund will borrow the money. Now, it's called limited recourse borrowing. What does that mean? It means that, let's say your super fund has got $500,000 in shares and it's got another $100,000 investment, and now you want to buy a property. By putting this into the property trust, we silo the ownership, if you like, of that asset. Limited recourse means if something goes wrong and that loan defaults, only that property can be sold to recover the money. So they can't come after the $500,000 worth of shares that's in the super fund. It's only the sale of that property. Okay. Now, in relation to equity, it can only be used for the one purpose. So that purpose was buying. You can't redraw equity. The only time that you can crystallize that equity is by selling the asset and putting the cash back in, and then going and buying another property. Okay, we can't borrow. We can't borrow, another 200 grand against property A to buy property B. It's just not something you could do at the moment.
How does refinancing with SMSF on existing properties work?
Yeah, we can do some good stuff with refinancing. There's a few places where we can get conditional approvals very, very quickly based on the current rental income and the contributions. Refinancing does work. Once upon a time, when this first started, which was quite a few years ago, we thought that refinancing would never happen because, you're not allowed to borrow again against the property. But in this case, it is happening because we're not changing the loan balance. So we're not saying we want. Now, there's a reasonable margin, but it has to be made up.
Okay.
By cash in the fund. What I mean by that is, you might refinance your home loan at $650,000 and just take an extra 20 to buy a car or a pool or what have you when you do that at the time of the refinance. You don't do that with your super fund. It's dollar for dollar plus fees.
Yep.
And so, all of the other fees have to be contributed by the fund in cash. But the process is relatively straightforward. We're not examining trust deeds like we would have when we first started. So when they're set up and it's your first borrowing, the bank or non-bank will want to vet the SMSF trust deed and the property trust deed. And that used to cost sort of, $1,500 to $3,000 sometimes. That's being done very cheaply now at like $750 or $500. And with refinances where the fund is more than 2 years old, the trust deeds are not being vetted. And so it's not adding a cost or a process.
Okay. I've got some further questions here. So thanks for that, Todd. A comment from Unga was a great question. I'd always wondered what's the best investment for the SMSF. He currently has one unit on an SMSF and was wondering if to invest in a house or land or commercial property. Unga, we might come back to that. I was talking to Todd earlier about, he mentioned the main use of SMSF were mainly from those looking to purchase a residential property or for commercial purpose, and I'll touch more on the commercial shortly. Question here from Peter: if after being given approval to purchase a property via SMSF, can ownership be via an offshore company?
That's a good question. I don't know what we're getting at.
So, Peter, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. It sounds like if you've been approved to purchase a property using your SMSF, assuming Todd, the Bear Trust has been set up, can the ownership of the Bear Trust be an offshore company?
The ownership of the Bear Trust. Okay, so you will have. Look, my answer would be I don't know, but I don't think so. And so we would have to get some advice from accountants or tax advisors or SMSF advisors on that. I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like something that should be done. It's Australian superannuation. I mean, would they be shareholders? Well, the members usually are the shareholders. That's how a super fund works. So, excuse me, I can't see where the offshore company actually comes into the ownership structure. I'd probably have to see it on paper, and then hand it off to someone to have a look at.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
and prior to when you get the approval, that's based on the existing ownership and the structure from the acquisition and the way the SMSF has been set up in the beginning, right?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, we typically don't get pre-approvals for SMSF. They just don't. Banks don't like doing them. They're a lot of work. They're very complex. They would prefer that you came with an actual application. So the process we go through with our clients is having a look at the numbers up front and does it make sense according to the calculators,
Yep.
and then preparing them or educating them on here are the documents that we're going to need to put this together.
Okay, awesome. So that might be a good point for Unga, who's asked, what's the bare minimum you need in SMSF to purchase a property, and also what to do in that exercise. What do you do in that exercise that we spoke about previously? Is there a online tool or something that we do, or how do you help with that part of the process?
You mean working out what you can afford? Is that what you mean, Sia?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, because
Okay.
he's also asked what's the bare minimum he needs in SMSF to be able to purchase a property.
Okay, that's a different story that's a different scenario to sort of how much should I have at my SMSF. So there are lots of numbers bandied about how much you should have in there, and I'm not authorized, if you like, to say how much you should have. But thinking logically, if you have a SMSF and you want to buy a property, you're going to need 10 to 20%. So if the property's $500,000, you're going to, let's say you need 100,000. You also need to cover your stamp duty, your fees, and you should have liquidity in there. So you should have, what if it's not rented? I know vacancies are low at the moment, but if it's not rented, then it's your contributions that are going to have to pay their payments, and you need to make sure that they're enough. And if they're not enough, you increase contributions or have sufficient liquidity or cash sitting inside the super fund to make up the difference until you get a new tenant in there. Or you might have to pay for emergency repairs, just like an investment property outside of super. So I can't tell you what the minimum is. I think what you need to do is think logically about how much you'd need to spend if you were going to buy a property, and you should talk to a financial planner about that. And that really answers the same question you had before in relation, should I buy residential, commercial, etc. It comes down to what is your investment plan. It comes down to the returns on the property you think you're buying, the risk you're willing to take. Commercial property is often seen as riskier than residential because you can't sell it as quickly. The returns are higher, but you can't sell it as quickly if you need to get out. Again, what's your investment strategy? What are you trying to achieve? And talk to an accountant / financial planner, financial planner ideally, about does it fit that strategy? As we said at the start, self-managed doesn't mean you can't take advice. In fact, you should be getting it.
Thanks, Todd. Appreciate your feedback. And guys, for those of you who are still listening, again, feel free to drop down any questions that you have before we wrap it up. And Todd, if while we're waiting, if there's any more questions, for those who might have further questions or want to get in touch, I know that you can either take care of them or put them in the right direction. Actually, got a question here. Can you combine SMSF with a partner?
If you're talking about structures, then if you have a partner, you would both decide to be members of your own self-managed super fund. And so then typically what happens is, two people take their individual retail funds from Oz Super or wherever and roll them in. Sorry, see, I'm having trouble with my throat today.
It's okay.
Roll them both in individually. They may need financial planner help to do that, to roll those in to the self-managed super fund. We see that quite a bit when that's how they're set up,
Yes.
So,
yes. And that answers your question, Uma. So, Todd, for those who have further questions or might want to reach out directly, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? And if I need, I can leave links in the comments for those who are listening.
Sure. So you can go to our website. That's at xenium.finance. That's it. Excuse me. My email is to@xenium.partners. And my phone number is 0404 847 857. So those are the easiest ways.
Great. Thanks, Todd. I'll drop them into the comments. And guys, again, if you have any further questions, feel free to drop that into the comment. We'll come back to you at another time. I appreciate your time joining us today and answering these questions for those interested in SMSF finance today, Todd. So thanks. And the RAL members, I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.
Thanks, Theo. Cheers.